You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and Florida is being wild again. You can guarantee when I bring you a story from Florida that it will most likely have some unusual twist, and this one, well, it has it. Let's start with some backstory. Dr. Ben Brown, he's a plastic surgeon out of Gulf Breeze, Florida. Well, he received his education at 3 different universities. He attended the University of Minnesota between 2001 to 2003, but he didn't receive a degree at that time. Ben Brown then attended Tulane University between 2003 and 2005, and that's when he earned his bachelor's degree. He then attended medical school at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. That was between 2005 and 2009, and there he earned his medical degree. Dr. Brown specialized in plastic surgery during his residency at Georgetown University between 2009 and 2015. Okay, all of this is according to his practitioner profile on the Florida Department of Health website. On his LinkedIn profile, Ben Brown said he worked as a resident physician in plastic and reconstructive surgery at MedStar Health. That was between 2009 and 2015, so that's while he was finishing up his residency. Then he moved to Pensacola in 2015, and Ben Brown worked as a plastic surgeon at Gulf Coast Plastic Surgery. Finally, he opened Restore Plastic Surgery in Gulf Breeze in 2017. Well, that's his professional career, but what about his personal? Well, in 2022, Ben married Hillary Brown. Now, Hillary had 3 kids from a previous marriage, and Ben, well, he brought children to the marriage as well. He has 2 sons. And Hillary's father told the Pensacola News-Journal that Ben and Hillary had a volatile relationship that vacillated from hot to cold. But he said his daughter did enjoy their life together. And he also said she wasn't scared to have her husband use his skills and perform plastic surgery on her face and body from time to time. But hindsight is always so much clearer because Hillary did allow Ben to perform several procedures on her in late November of 2023, and she died as a result of those surgeries. On the afternoon of November 21st, Dr. Ben Brown called 911 reporting that a female was in cardiac arrest and needed assistance. And according to a police affidavit, when patrol deputies arrived on the scene of the 911 call, firefighters were actively trying to resuscitate a female patient. The staff told officers the patient was Hillary Brown. The staff also said Hillary was having multiple procedures that day that included liposuction, lip injections, ear adjustments, and more. And remember how I said it would get weird? Well, the staff said things were wonky that day. Prior to the surgery, Hillary prepared her own IV bags that were filled with anesthetic. She has 0 medical training. She is familiar with office procedures, but she doesn't have any licensure to be working as a medical assistant or an LPN or an RN. And the staff also said she took a plethora of pills. That's their words exactly. And all of that happened prior to the surgery. Now, those pills were later clarified to be Versed, Tramadol, Gabapentin, and possibly Valium. And the procedure allegedly began 1 hour after the pills were ingested. Well, the first surgery was on the lower abdomen. And after about an hour and a half, it is alleged Hillary began to walk around, taking a break before the next set of surgeries were to begin. Now, the surgeries were taking longer than expected, so when the IV bags were depleted, Dr. Brown poured 2 containers worth of liquid into a bowl. He didn't dilute the liquid at all. And then he began sucking the liquid into a syringe and injecting the dosage directly into Hillary's vein in her arm. A while later, he sucked up more liquid in the syringe and injected the dosage directly into her face. Now, throughout the whole process of administering drugs, Dr. Brown had yet to record any of the dosages. He had no ability to reflect back on what he had even given her. Now, staff that were in the suite at the time of the reckless syringe dosages said Hillary expressed that her vision had gotten blurry and the staff noticed her face was swelling. Medical techs that were not in the surgery suite recorded that they heard Dr. Brown yell Hillary's name, trying to wake her. And then minutes later, Hillary began convulsing. Staff aiding in the surgery asked if they should call 911 multiple times. Dr. Brown instructed the staff not to call for help. He said he wanted to try to repair the situation himself. So how many times was he asked? The staff asked 4 or 5 times. This all according to various staff accounts. Now, inside the surgery suite, there was no oxygen available and no EKG to monitor her heart. And the entire office was not equipped with an AED device. Okay, that's like a mobile crash cart. Well, finally, after 15 minutes of her being unresponsive, a staff member took it upon themselves to call 911. She was rushed to the hospital, but Hillary Brown died several days later after receiving care in an ICU at Ascension Sacred Heart Hospital. Now, just 2 days after she was hospitalized, Ben made a social media post where he called Hillary his soulmate and that the family needed prayers for a miracle. He wrote that Hillary had a cardiac arrest and that he called 911 and started CPR. He then wrote that her heart came back, but her brain was not doing well. And there's more. He then wrote that Hillary Ellington Brown was his soulmate, his world, his everything. Then he made the plea for her to please come back. Now, when she was on life support in the hospital, Hillary's father said Ben seemed more concerned about money than about Hillary's life. Apparently, Dr. Brown's private medical coverage was slated to be canceled on November 30th, and her dad alleges Ben was sending him texts to make sure that her father was understanding the plan on sending Hillary to hospice either before or after the date. So what he's doing is he's trying to calculate the death date so that the care is covered. Her father said the following: "He sent me a text that we need to make sure that her time of death is before the 30th because the insurance benefits go away and my grandkids wouldn't get some of the life insurance." All right, that's all because they would have to spend the life insurance money on her care instead of the kids' futures. Now, her father went on to explain that at the time, he wasn't even worried about money. Instead, he said his daughter was laying in that ICU and he and Hillary's family just kept being hopeful that she's going to pull through. But all Ben was worried about was the time of death being before the 30th and that he was going to sell everything and file bankruptcy and go buy a new vehicle before his credit tanked. Her father then went on to say that during that time, he didn't want to hear anything about what Ben was saying about his daughter. He was just concerned that his daughter was lying there, and that's all that was on his mind. And her father also said he was appalled that Ben sold some of his wife's things on social media so soon after her death. These items included skiing equipment, which he believes shows his lack of remorse. Now, he said the following: "My family lives in a sea of tears for eternity due to the actions of one careless individual. His ego and arrogance overshadowed the need for help, prolonging oxygen deprivation to her brain, and ultimately causing her death." He then went further and said, "Ben Brown took the mother from my grandchildren, and he took my brightest star. Hillary gave the ultimate sacrifice so Ben Brown cannot hurt anyone else. Maybe in prison, he will get the attention he deserves." Now, he might go to prison because Dr. Brown was arrested last week after an investigation determined that Dr. Brown's treatment of Hillary was a violation of the expected standard of care. Now, that report also determined that the variety of issues in the office and the surgery setting presented harm to any further patients. The medical examiner determined that Hillary died from complications stemming from lidocaine toxicity. Now, Ben is also being charged with second-degree murder, and he could face up to life in prison. And this wasn't the first time that Dr. Brown had been accused of providing, well, let's just call it what it was, crappy care. A report by the Florida Department of Health found numerous violations that could constitute, quote, medical malpractice. Past patients and staff alleged that Dr. Brown did not follow proper protocols at his practice. His own office manager told Newsweek that he didn't care about his patients anymore. She said when she began working for him in 2018 that he was the best in the industry. But when she left his practice 4 years later, he was so wrapped up in his personal issues and his legal troubles that he had just become sloppy. She said that patient care was left up to his physician's assistant and also to the office manager. She also said the office had basically turned into a wound care facility. She said the PA was mostly treating infections, performing office procedures such as cutting necrotic tissue away and suturing wounds back closed. So what she's saying is the PA would have to cut off dead tissue days and weeks after Dr. Brown performed procedures. And then she also said that the wounds he was suturing closed, well, they wouldn't stay closed, whether it be by bad technique or potential infection. Now, the office manager then said that she was constantly monitoring patient calls and also texts on her own cell phone at all hours of the day and night. She said she has witnessed all of the horrible and that she felt so helpless. And you guys, it's not just the office staff. Patients have told their horror stories. Jane Hawkins, she's a patient of Dr. Brown's. Well, she told the News Journal about her experience with Dr. Brown back in November of 2022. She had consulted with Dr. Brown to have her breast implants removed and to also have what's referred to in the industry as a mini mommy makeover. She would get a tummy tuck and use the fat from that tummy tuck to rebuild her breasts. Okay, that mini makeover was a 6-hour surgery. And when she woke up, she discovered that Dr. Brown had completed some surgeries that she had consented to, and then he had completed others that they had not agreed upon. He had taken some of the fat and placed it in her butt. Now, she did not consent to that. Following the surgery, her sutures became loose, and by the time she went to her local emergency room, her wound in her stomach was 9 inches wide by 4 inches across. Okay, I don't even know how to tell you guys how big that scar is because I had 2 C-sections. 2 of the 3 of my kids were C-sections. My C-section scar is so much smaller than that. Now, the wound was so infected by the time she went to the ER that it couldn't be closed. They couldn't suture it back up. So Jane had to, for the next 2 weeks, pack the wound with acetic acid soaked gauze as the body repaired the damage and fought off the infection. Now, Jane also suffered from necrotic tissue that we talked about earlier. That dead tissue had to be cut from her body. Now, based on this and other cases, Florida Republican Representatives Michelle Zalzman and Alex Andrade are calling for changes in state legislation to help prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Now, Alex Andrade said she would support legislation that would prevent physicians from performing operations on family members. And Michelle Zalzman, well, she's working on closing legal loopholes that have prevented people who have suffered injuries from surgical procedures from being properly compensated. So you might be asking that. Why aren't these patients asking for compensation? Why hadn't Dr. Brown been sued to high heaven? Well, that answer lies in the fact that he had very little insurance coverage, and it would have been years for patients to receive compensation from his personal assets. Now, just because I could, I went to Yelp and I checked Dr. Ben Brown's ratings, and he has 13 reviews and a rating of 1.7 stars. Now, that's just anecdotal, but I wanted to check other sources besides his office manager and one patient. Now, I also learned he has one malpractice case currently open against him. And in that case, there's 2 plaintiffs, Wendy and William Carden. And they allege that Dr. Brown used foreign materials in a post-mastectomy reconstructive surgery. All right, what does that mean? Wendy had her breasts removed, most likely due to a cancer threat. And when Dr. Brown reconstructed her breast, she alleges that she did not give him consent to use the materials that he did, and that she eventually contracted an infection that grew septic at the surgery site. Wendy also claims she suffered nerve damage to her upper extremities because Dr. Brown kept her arms in an unnatural and awkward position for too long during the surgery. All right, in her obituary, Hillary was remembered for the fact that she had chosen to donate her organs before passing. This meant she gifted 5 different individuals with her organs after her death. She left behind 2 daughters, Mary and Ava, and a son named William. Now, tributes on the page of her obituary remember her as electric, sweet, and thoughtful. A family friend requested that if there were roses in heaven, could God please pick her a bunch? And when you give them to her, please tell her that we miss her and that we long to embrace her again. Hillary was 33 years old when she died. Now, do you want more from Florida? Well, I have another crazy story. Because a car theft was thwarted in Fort Myers when a witness called 911. But the conversation got weird for the dispatcher because the female witness said she was the one stealing the car. Okay, this all happened a couple of weeks ago at 1 a.m. when a 37-year-old woman told the dispatcher that she was attempting to steal a vehicle from the dealership parking lot, and she just wanted police to know. When deputies arrived on scene, they saw the woman exiting the stolen Toyota Corolla. She had an explanation, though. She was participating in a game of black ops to steal a car. And in her mind, she reasoned that if she told deputies in advance, then the carjacking would be legal. Guess what? It's not legal. She was, however, able to skate with a lesser charge because when the deputies arrived, they were able to only charge her with trespassing since she had not driven the vehicle off the car lot. Now, she has been arrested 6 times previously, according to jail records. And let's head to Utah, Washington County to be exact. And if that sounds familiar, it's the same county where YouTube vlogger Ruby Franke was arrested and pled guilty to child abuse charges. But here's this story. 28-year-old Mia Bailey has been arrested and charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder for killing her parents and attempting to kill her brother. Now, Mia Bailey has transitioned from male to female and was previously known as Colin Troy Bailey. And you guys, this deals with some sensitive issues, and I want to clarify up front that I will refer to Mia as female and by her new name, because Mia had that legally changed last year. Well, last week, Mia allegedly drove to her parents' home, Joseph and Gail Bailey. She walked through the front door uninvited. When she approached her mother inside the home, she shot her multiple times. Hearing the shots, her father came towards the sounds, and Mia met him in the hallway, and she shot him in the head. She then allegedly fired a round through a closed door into a bedroom that her brother and her brother's wife had locked themselves in. Now, her brother later escaped through a window and he called 911 at a neighbor's home, but not before Mia left the scene in her yellow Kia Soul. Alerts went out throughout the community, warning that Mia was armed and dangerous, and also that she frequently wore wigs to alter her appearance. Now, a shelter in place was also mandated for several neighborhoods, and police began the all-night manhunt through St. George, Utah. At 2 a.m., officers received a tip that Mia was not far from the scene, walking alone. Cops approached who they believed to be Mia, and they commanded her to stop walking. Instead, she pulled a handgun from her waistband and held it up to her head while continuing to walk away from the police. She entered a nearby ravine and continued walking. Police just let her go. And several hours later, Mia was cornered in the daylight by SWAT teams and arrested. She was about 7 miles from her parents' home. Once they removed the weapon from Mia's possession, authorities determined it was the same caliber of weapon as the shell casings found at the feet of her murdered parents. And Mia didn't hide much once she was arrested. According to the arrest affidavit, she told authorities she went to her parents' home with the sole intention of killing them. She also admitted she intended to kill her brother. She told authorities that after shooting the 1 round through the basement bedroom door, that she went back upstairs to make sure her parents were dead. She allegedly shot her father and her mother each 1 more time in the head before fleeing. And then she allegedly told officers the following: "I'd do it again. I hate them." Well, she went on to express her hatred for her brother as well. And the documents also say she showed hatred towards other extended family members. Those members told authorities they were scared of Mia even before the killings. 11 months ago, Mia's brother, Corey, had sought a protective order against Mia. Now, 3 minor children were also listed on that order. And a temporary order of protection was granted. But feelings must have softened, and the order was lifted 3 months later without prejudice, meaning it could be reinstated any time. Now, during the interrogation following her arrest, Mia bragged to authorities that she had fled in her car and evaded capture for several hours. She said she slept in a park bathroom, that she jumped fences and she hid in bushes to avoid capture. And she bragged she did all of that hiding from drones and helicopters being operated by authorities. Now, she is being held without bond. The Washington County Attorney's Office has already stated they will not be seeking the death penalty in this case. You guys, I wish I could tell you more about Joseph and Gail. This is still so new that not much information is out about the couple. And finally, this update to a story I brought you on Rise in Crime on March 4th of this year. And we now have a quick update to the case, and you might remember the name, Jamie Lee Komorowski. All right, she's the 26-year-old woman who allegedly drove under the influence and collided with a golf cart carrying newlyweds Samantha Miller and Eric Hutchinson. Now, the newlywed couple were riding on the back portion of the golf cart, along with Eric's brother-in-law and nephew. They had just finished celebrating their wedding and were headed back to the hotel. That's when Komorowski allegedly rammed the golf cart with her Toyota Camry. Komorowski was said to be traveling at 65 miles per hour when she plowed into the golf cart. The posted speed limit? 25 miles per hour. Now, also that night, Komorowski allegedly tested 3 times the legal limit for her blood alcohol content. Now, the test was only obtained after authorities arrested her. And according to court documents, she became belligerent at the scene, claiming she had only drunk 1 beer and 1 shot of tequila. But responding officers said she was having trouble even standing, and she also smelled of alcohol. And with this story, I always clarify that it was legal to drive a golf cart on that Foley Beach road in South Carolina. Eric and Samantha weren't doing anything wrong. All right, that collision that killed Samantha and severely wounded Eric, well, it's been wrapped up in legal wranglings because Eric filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit against Komorowski and several local bars and businesses. So here's how that lawsuit is going down. Several of those businesses, including those who had served her alcohol and the car rental company that provided her the vehicle, well, they agreed to settle their portion of the lawsuit last week, and the court approved that settlement. El Gallo Bar and Grill, Snapper Jack's, the Drop-In Bar and Deli, and the Crab Shack all either allowed her to become intoxicated or they continued selling alcohol when she had already grown far too drunk. This according to the initial lawsuit. And that was filed clear back in October, so it's taken a long time for us to find this settlement. Now that $1.3 million that has been awarded to Samantha's estate, well, it broke out like this. The Crab Shack, they owe $640,000. The Foley Deli, they owe $320,000. Beachfront Bars, which is Snapper Jack's, they owe $320,000. Progressive Northern Insurance Company owes $75,000. And Enterprise Rent-A-Car owes $24,000. Eric and his lawyer, Danny Dalton, when they were in court last week to sign off on the settlement, they said they will net the parties roughly $863,000 after fees. This is all according to local station WCSC. Now, Dalton, the lawyer, he said the amount was less than anticipated due to an ongoing estate dispute between Eric and the slain bride's mother, Lisa Miller. Yeah, you guys, it gets worse. The mother-in-law has challenged whether the couple were actually legally married. She's also sparred with Eric's camp over how much money she'll receive from the settlements. and she has asked the court to remove Eric as the representative of her daughter's estate and to place her in that position instead. Now, Komorowski was released on bond in March, and her criminal case is still working its way through the court system. She's currently under house arrest. If she is convicted, she faces up to a minimum of 1 year in prison and a maximum of 25 years in prison. Clearly, this case is not over. I will bring you the updates as they occur. All right, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. If you're loving this content, I have a special favor. Please share this show with a friend. And of course, we always love 5-star reviews and positive comments. And you could like and follow on all of our social media and YouTube accounts. We love comments there as well, and especially case suggestions. And we're so grateful to have you join us here at Oh No Media. You can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.